What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Absolute Strength Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hunt, and today on the show, we have Stan Efferding, IFBB pro bodybuilder, elite raw powerlifter, managed the two things at the same time, which is really unheard of. I mean, hitting world record powerlifting totals while IFBB pro bodybuilder. Crazy. But I brought him on the show today to talk about the vertical diet. I'm sure you've seen it on social media. It seems like everybody's on the vertical diet. Everyone's talking about the vertical diet right now. I think probably due to him working with Brian Shaw and Thor, the world's strongest man guys. It's gotten a lot of publicity, a lot of talk. So I wanted to bring him on the show. I wanted to ask him some questions, see what this diet is all about. And as always, I take the white belt mentality here. I'm just a guy asking questions. I leave all my preconceived notions and ideas pretty much behind me here and just, I'm going to ask this guy some questions. I'm going to learn from Stan today. And as always, let's try to learn one thing. If we get one thing out of this, it's a win. That's how I look at all this shit. If we can take one thing, if we can implement one thing into our routine and get better from it, we're better. All right. Stan Efferding. I'm excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Biggs. Appreciate it.
For sure. Yeah, this is cool. Actually, you first got on my radar, I think it was, I'm trying to think what the year was, when you were in Flex magazine initially.
Yeah, but I think that was 2010 or 11 right in there.
Yeah, I was going to say probably around 2010. You got into Flex.
Yep, for sure.
I think it was, I'm trying to think, was it about the World's Strongest Bodybuilder stuff? Was that when you first got in?
Yeah, that must have been when it was, because Flex magazine covered that for the Olympia.
Yeah, when you were challenging, was it Johnny Jackson?
Yep, that was the one.
Yeah, that was pretty wild.
Yeah, it was a good time. Boy, so much has happened since then. It's crazy to think that was that long ago. I can hardly remember it until I see pictures.
Yeah. So what? I guess what part of your bodybuilding powerlifting career was that?
It was actually towards the beginning of my return, 06 and 08. I did some amateur shows. 09, I won the pro card. So it was shortly after that. It was 2010. I did the World's Strongest Bodybuilder. 09, I also set that world record in powerlifting. So I was kind of doing it all at the same time.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, it was pretty wild. What year did you get your pro card?
2009.
All right, yeah. So you got your pro card and set the world record in the same year.
Yeah. That was
that must have been that must have been a crazy year. What were you training with Flex Wheeler for the bodybuilding at that time?
Yep, absolutely.
So what did that training look like?
That was hypertrophy stuff. Flex likes a lot of repetitions, a lot of volume. So we didn't do any squats. We didn't do any deadlifts. I don't even think we did any bench presses. We did just strictly like bodybuilding style movements. Doesn't mean it wasn't a lot of hard work. It's just that we kind of focused on, hypertrophy style training, shorter rest periods, higher rep sets, lots of volume, AM, PM training, splits, and then lots of food. Flex was the real proponent of putting in, 6, 7, 8 meals a day, mostly steak and rice. Kind of makes up the vertical portion of my diet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like twice a day training it was mostly hypertrophy style stuff. No, it seems crazy though that you weren't doing hardly any of the powerlifting movements, but then you were able to transition and then get right back into powerlifting.
Yeah, what's interesting is now that I look back on it, I think that was optimal because it seems like the lower rep powerlifting type movements, they put a lot of strain on the lumbar spine, which helps, creates more fatigue and central nervous system overload. Kind of decreases your ability to recover quickly enough to do, AM, PM style training or the body parts twice a week. I thought it was it impeded my bodybuilding performance all those years trying to lift heavy in terms of optimizing it.
Mm-hmm.
So now I cycle it. I'll do a 6-8 week strength cycle with a 6-8 week hypertrophy block.
Which is pretty typical, it seems like.
Yeah, it should be, I think. Some people try and hybrid them, but I think they're different messages for the body. And if you really want to optimize, you got to kind of send the right message consistently.
Yeah, I think people get too caught up in the idea of quote-unquote power building.
Yeah, no, there's a place for it, sure. But I just think when you're competing in one or the other, then they are different. And
Yeah.
you need to start to, and even like in Olympic weightlifting, when Klokov competed, he would spend a lot of time doing cardio in the off season. Now that wasn't conducive to strength, but it was really good for building up his recovery. So when he started to transition back into strength, his recovery was such, had a carryover effect. And I kind of felt that from those bodybuilding type hypertrophy, high rep, low rest, types of blocks that I did. When I started powerlifting again, not only were all my joints healthy, but I would recover quicker from workouts. And so gradually I could build up, my strength and minimize, and decrease all the volume and reps and sets. And it was optimal for recovery.
Yeah, so you were pretty much heading right into the powerlifting cycles with your muscular endurance pretty much as high as it would ever be.
Exactly. And my recovery was great as a result.
What did your powerlifting training look like at that time?
We just went for heavy stuff. I kept everything under 5 reps. People always ask about accessory work, and I've just been a big believer that you stick with the fundamentals. An accessory for the bench press might be bringing your grip in and hitting some 3-board triples. I don't run over to the cable push-down machine and do 20 rep sets for triceps. It just doesn't, again, wrong message. It's not consistent with strength. And so if you do the hypertrophy in the off-season, and then as you get ready for powerlifting meet, you get rid of most of the ancillary work and focus just on the big lifts and variations of them to build strength.
So what was like the training frequency like on the powerlifting side?
Well, that's a big thing, is that some people, for a long time, they were doing the Bulgarian system of trying to train everything 5 times a week. And I never found that to work for me, particularly at my age. So I actually went completely the other direction. And I would squat one week, and then the next weekend I would deadlift, and then the following weekend I would squat, and the following weekend I would deadlift. I believe in terms of strength, they're very similar. In terms of the load on the lumbar spine, the central nervous system load, the glute, quad, and back involvement, and hip involvement, I think they're the same exercise to me in terms of strength. And so the idea of putting both of them in every week at those poundages. Now, mind you, Olympic lifters can train more often because they're not using such a high percentage of their max load. They're stacking for snatches and for overhead press. And so really the squat portion is probably only 60% of their max. And so training, when you get to training at 85+% of your max, if I'm doing an 800-pound squat one week, I certainly shouldn't be able to deadlift also that week and then squat the next weekend again, 800 pounds. It wouldn't work for me. So I was squatting twice a month, deadlifting twice a month. And that, was good for me. I built a lot of strength that way.
What about on the bench?
Once a week on the bench, and I might, throw in some a workout later in the week that would be some chin-ups or some variations. But again, I wouldn't go over 5 reps when I was trying to build strength. It just didn't make sense to me.
So how many days in the week were you in the gym at that point?
3.
About 3?
Yeah, it was about it. A bench workout, a squat workout, and maybe some other, ancillary thing.
Yeah, I have a feeling like a lot of people listening are probably surprised by that. They're probably looking like, holy shit, that's like really out in left field for what a lot of the raw guys do now.
It seems that way. And if you're a young guy and you're beginner, intermediate, maybe you can handle more volume. You're not using as much weight. But at some point, when those loads increase, it's hard to do that kind of volume. Milanichev spoke of the fact that he used to do a ton of volume, and then when he switched to lower volume stuff, he got stronger. The Lilly Bridge program's very similar. It's a squat one week, bench or a deadlift the next, and then alternate. And they used to do squats twice a week as well. But as he got stronger, that got harder and harder to maintain. So
you have to look at the overall volume because a component of volume is obviously weight. I mean, sets times reps times weight. The tonnage side of it, as that goes up, you're not going to be able to, recover. Like you said, if you're going to squat 800 pounds, you're not going to be able to do that again or deadlift that again 2 days later.
Yeah. Well, and for me, 600 for 5 reps and 8 1/4 for 1 rep, I'd create more fatigue with the 8 1/4 for 1 rep. That's just what I believe. And so as the weights got heavier and my reps got lower, I just needed more rest time. I listened to my body, and I slept a lot, and I did a good volume of rehab. I said I'd put a recumbent bike in my room, so the day after squats, I would do 3 10-minute HIIT training spins to put some blood in my legs without any eccentric loading. And I recovered very well from that. Plus a lot of sleep and a lot of food.
Yeah, that's what we're going to get into here. That's why I really wanted to bring you on the show. Talk about this vertical diet. But so what was your diet like? You talked about when you were bodybuilding with Flex Wheeler, it was pretty similar, steak and rice. What about when you were
really
powerlifting?
The core of the diet really came from my experience with Flex Wheeler. There's no question that my body transformed between 2008 and 2009. Mm-hmm. And I've showed comparison pictures of me competing at 220 some odd low pounds in bodybuilding in 2008. And then after training with Flex in 2009, I was on stage at 250.
Holy shit.
And it's a ridiculous difference. And we're talking about, 1 year apart and pretty much the same off-season weight. It was just that I held on to so much more mass as a result of increasing workload and keeping calories high. I didn't do any cardio, and I didn't cut calories, and I just increased my training sessions to create a calorie deficit of hypertrophy style training. So, and I fed that with a ton of steak. I used to be the guy that would eat chicken and fish just like everybody else. But what I found is that the steak, particularly with the iron and the B12 and the zinc and the creatine, was a lot more efficient for my body. And I also believe the saturated fat is a much more preferable source of fat for the body than the polyunsaturates that are higher in chicken and turkey. Chicken and turkey eat soy for 3 months of their life, and then you're eating them. What value does that provide you, in terms of micronutrients or nutrient density? So while the protein might be similar, the rest of it is far inferior to steak. Where the calf may wean on milk for 1.5 years. The cow has 5 stomachs to, I think, properly deal with all the things that your stomach can't deal with. And you end up with a more nutrient-dense, more saturated fat-dense, source. And I thrived on it. And all of my athletes since, I've taken many great athletes off of protein powders and put them on steak or bison. And it just skyrockets their performance, their digestion, their immune system, everything improves. Are
you getting, well, not really specifically to the vertical diet, but for you specifically, is pretty much the only protein source, is it red meat, or are you throwing in some other things like eggs?
Well, I throw in some eggs, but it's mostly for the micronutrient value.
Yeah.
The egg yolks in particularly are hugely dense in nutrients. Choline, biotin, these are very important for vitamin K2. These are very important for calcium absorption. And the egg white itself is actually not very nutrient dense. Again, a comparable protein source, but I don't focus on macros. It's not my focus. As long as you get adequate calories in, now I'm looking to fill those macros with high nutrient dense, highly bioavailable foods that also don't cause distress to your stomach. And we know that egg whites have avidin in them and can cause digestive disorders. Mm-hmm. We know the same thing's true of broccoli. We know the same thing's true of wheat and pasta and spaghetti and even oats if not cooked properly. All of those things cause digestive distress. You cannot build the majority of your calories on something that's going to cause you digestive distress. And so I have the micronutrient foundation where I get all of the nutrients. And then the vertical axis is really where I build volume for the larger athletes that have higher muscle tissue, more workload, need more energy. It could be CrossFit, it could be football, powerlifting, strongman. If they just need calories, I'm going to feed them stuff that's very easy to use, which is the steak and the white rice. It doesn't cause any distress on the stomach. So that's kind of how I build the program.
Yeah, so it's pretty much steak is the protein source then.
I believe it's the best protein source, absolutely by far.
Okay, how many meals a day are you eating right now?
I usually still eat 6 meals a day. It's just based on appetite, and my metabolism's pretty good. Somebody like Shaw or Hawthorne might only eat 6 or 7 meals, but they'll eat a lot more in each meal. They might eat a lot more steak and a lot more rice. They're on 1,000 grams of carbs a day. I can't fuel that 1,000 grams of carbs with bread or pasta or oats, or potatoes even, because they're so high satiety. Mm-hmm. I have to fuel the majority of those carbs because of their body's demands for just plain glycogen to fuel their workouts, and to the amount of calories they burn just at rest is ridiculous. I fuel most of it with white rice because it's so efficient and clean, and they don't end up on the toilet all the time. So those are the things I focus on with the program. There's a lot of other little things in there. I make sure they get in fruit every day. I talked about how the fructose stimulates the liver, it keeps it happy. that's one of the things that get impacted the most when you have a high-fat diet or you have a huge body mass or workload. The liver will slow down, which will slow down the thyroid. And all of that affects your body temperature, your performance, your metabolism. So I keep fruit in there, fructose in particularly from the fruit. Keeps the liver happy. You know how appetite suppression occurs, not only from a massive amount of food, particularly high fat and high muscle meat food like steak, but also from performance-enhancing drugs. Yep. And I found from my own blood tests over the years that if I'm using an oral before a powerlifting meet, that my appetite goes away because my liver enzymes elevate. And that impacts my metabolism, my recovery, my appetite. And if I can improve that by using fruit in particular, because that makes the liver happy, that's what it likes, and then iodine for the thyroid, then my appetite comes back. And I see it in my blood tests. So this isn't just known in science. I realized it through application from myself from doing blood tests so frequently throughout the years, probably over 100 blood tests in the last 10 years. I watched my thyroid stimulating hormone levels and my thyroid levels, T4 and T3. I looked at my liver function when I used cranberry juice for iodine for thyroid function, when I used fructose for the liver, when I stayed away from foods that suppress the liver. We talked about all those anti-nutrient dense foods, lectins in beans, phytic acid in brown rice, all of those things. It's just as important as what you eat as what you do not eat. And I noticed that my health improved, my performance improved, my sleep, my immune system, all of it, which all helped performance. And these are the things that I did specifically for some of these great athletes that I've now had the opportunity to work with.
Yeah, so when you talk about adding fructose and fruit, how much and what are we talking about?
Well, the liver can handle about 75 to 100 grams a day, a healthy liver, a happy liver. So I don't really go over that. Mm-hmm. This isn't high fructose corn syrup and soda pop. There's extremes in everything. Mm-hmm. If you're at a deficiency, you're going to have a performance problem. When you optimize that, everything improves. When you go to a surplus, you end up with fatty liver disease. And that starts to have a drastic effect on thyroid as well as blood sugars. And if people's blood sugars, hemoglobin A1C builds up and they get insulin resistant, then they can't absorb the nutrients. The nutrient partitioning changes to be primarily fat storage as opposed to glycogen and muscle. So I'm cautious about how much. And so I say I'll put about 3 ounces or 4 ounces of orange juice 3 or 4 times a day. That's not more than 50 grams of total carbohydrates for the day. And I use it like medicine. I use it 3 or 4 times a day. I use the cranberry juice like medicine. I use it twice a day. That way the body gets stimulated, the system, the metabolism gets stimulated frequently throughout the day so that it's healthy. I don't believe you can do it from the backside. I don't believe you can clean it out with a whole bunch of extra water or milk thistle or whatever else. I think you have to give the organs the tools that they need. Give the liver the fructose. Give the thyroid the iodine. Give your I even say for the kidneys, give sodium to your body, and it'll increase blood volume and make it easier to filter, along with all the great energy and recovery things that come from increasing sodium. And then I manage that also by saying that if you're going to take in sodium, you need adequate calcium so that salt doesn't increase blood pressure. Calcium relaxes the blood vessels. If you want to improve calcium absorption, you need adequate vitamin D because that improves calcium absorption. And if you're absorbing a lot of calcium, then you need vitamin K too, because that preferentially deposits calcium into the areas that you need it and not in your blood vessels. So all of this is built into my diet. There's sources for all of those things that I put into my foundational foods, the horizontal foundation. And I say that you can't put a 3-bedroom house on a 2-bedroom foundation. So I build a really strong foundation, and now on the vertical axis with your steak and rice, you can build a skyscraper, and you have awesome performance.
Yeah, I like it. I like the idea of really just looking beyond just the macros of the food, but really optimizing the micronutrient value.
Oh, yeah, it does so much more for you. And we know now from the research, Examine.com, who's a highly reputable
that's a great site
in the industry. They're amazing. They did a meta-analysis recently, or posted one on macronutrient percentages not mattering. And of course, Dr. Lane Norton's been talking about this for years. When you control for calories
and protein
and get adequate protein, where you move the fats and carbs around does not matter. The caveat to that is in terms of performance. You need adequate carbs. But as far as weight loss and maintaining weight loss, we've seen from the research that it doesn't matter. And so now there's all these little things. If you go too low carb, how does that affect, like the keto diet, how does that affect your hydration? When you lose the glycogen in the water and the salt from the muscles, do you start cramping? Does your performance start to decrease? It's not just about fat loss and weight loss at that point. It's about performance. And so I do look at macros in terms of fueling the body's workload, getting, CrossFitters or football players or strongmen through those, and even bodybuilders through those incredibly hard workouts. And what the optimal fuel source is. And I know people talk about becoming fat adapted, and that might work if you're jogging or just walking around all day. But when you're actually exerting yourself for competition, the most efficient source of food is that carbohydrate, that glycogen in the muscle. And so I make sure it's there. And I always say, you might be able to, hold on, did I lose you there?
No, I still got you, but your thing froze, I think.
Let me send that to voicemail. Had a call in.
This is a call-in show.
Is my handsome face back on there?
It was for a second.
Lost me again?
Yeah, there we are.
Let me finish that thought and say this. Just because something can be done doesn't mean it's optimal. And you can get to the top of the Empire State Building taking the stairs, but the elevator's a much better way to do it.
Yep.
And so when I talk about my program, I really don't need to shit on anybody else's program, but I really need to focus on the athlete's specific needs and design it for them.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. One of the things I talk about a lot too is what you touched on is, especially when it comes to weight loss, like calories and protein are the two most important things. Like if you can dial in the calories, dial in the protein, for the most part, you're going to be moving in the right direction. Now, everything beyond that is just, you can ice it on the cake and add in, whatever carbohydrate totals or fat totals are going to allow you to stick to the diet best or fuel your performance on whatever sport you're in or whatever you're training or lifestyle requires.
Yeah, now you just introduced a whole bunch of different variables because sticking to a diet and performance are two completely different things. Mm-hmm. And satiety, hunger becomes an important thing. And gut health becomes important. And immune system becomes important. So I'm really cautious to use foods that are very nutritious but don't have a lot of anti-nutrients. I try and provide some satiety through, say, a potato or and provide some immune system support through a carrot or through the iodine. Iodine in particular really helps the immune system. It flushes, fluoride and chlorine and bromide out of the system. And the carrots obviously have multiple benefits as a root tuber. They provide prebiotic benefit because they're a resistant starch. They allow the body to put toxins on that indigestible fiber and transfer them out of the system, so they're not just keep recirculating. It's a naringenin. It's an anti-estrogen. As is a healthy liver and a healthy thyroid function. That really helps control estrogen. So I really focus on all these things. So I have all those foods in my diet as a variety. But compliance is the biggest key. So the diet can't cause you a bunch of indigestion. It can't suppress your immune system. It has to have a decent amount of options and taste. But I find with salt and fruit, you end up not having a sweet tooth anymore.
Yeah.
That you're facing sugar because you lack sodium. That tends to be an alternative direction that the body pursues, and you end up with a lower sweet tooth as a result of implementing all these other micronutrients. I'm also really careful. I talk about performance enhancing drugs, but in the industry, whether it's men or women, a lot of the times they manage their exhaustion with stimulants, be it caffeine, ephedrine, even thyroid.
Yep.
Phentermine, things like that. Now that wrecks their adrenals. Now their body starts fighting them. The lymph shrinks, the immune system gets suppressed. They end up getting sicker faster. So there's so many things that we try and do on the front end rather than being reactive with drugs that might create more problems. We're proactive with food that gives the body what it needs so you don't have any energy loss because your liver's happy with the fructose and your thyroid's functioning correctly and you have adequate sodium in your system. So when you go to the workout, you're not tired and you power through that thing. The feedback I'm getting from thousands of people all over the world is that they're not tired anymore. They sleep better. Their stomach feels better. They don't have all the digestive problems and gas that occurs from egg whites and broccoli and the like. And when they get rid of coffee, they notice their digestion improves, their dehydration improves. And they don't hit that wall 30 minutes into a workout where they think they need more caffeine to solve the problem.
In terms of sodium, what What are we looking at there in terms of dosages and how you're adding it and implementing it?
You know, it's hard because everybody's different. And what's really great about this is, and Dr. D. Nicolantonio talks about this in the Salt Fix, you salt to taste. You put salt on all your meals. If you put too much on there, your tongue will tell you. Mm-hmm. And that's really where you start. Initially, I was throwing sodium tablets into water. But then looking at Dr. Godek's research from the Heat Institute, she handles, studies thermal regulation. She indicates that water is not the primary source of hydration, that minerals and electrolytes are, and the best way to get them is not through a drink like a Gatorade or throwing salt into your water, because you dilute them to such a point that if they're palatable, they're not effective. It'd be like drinking salt water if you had enough in there to give you any result.
Yeah.
Because the effects of salt are mitigated by the amount of water you drink.
That's why you can't drink salt water to hydrate yourself.
No, and that's why people shouldn't be guzzling down 2 gallons of water a day, because it's going to dehydrate you. It's going to wash all of those minerals out of your system, the sodium, potassium, and the rest.
You always see that with the bikini competitors carrying around huge gallons of water, but then they don't salt any of their foods. They actually avoid sodium.
You know, and that's so backwards about the system. The same thing with the egg whites and broccoli. We're just torturing these poor girls in 2 hours of cardio a day. They're just you walk back there and they look like stick figures. They have eating disorders and they feel terrible and their stomachs are bloated, and it's just horrible. And anything I could do to fix that problem, I'd love to in a very big way. But I know that my athletes aren't like that. I just trained an IFBB Pro bikini girl for a show recently, and she felt amazing, and her stomach was the smallest it had ever been. And she had no indigestion problems. She had no rebound. She ate salt all the way through the show, had great energy, felt amazing. So sodium's hugely important. Dr. Dean Nicolantonio recommends salting your food to taste and just doing that consistently. If you try and take a huge bolus of salt, your stomach will draw water in and piss it out your ass because it's going to be an offensive thing to you. So you got to be cautious. It's not like, more is better. This is just something that you start to include in your diet, and measuring it is different, not only based on the individual, but their workload. And some people are saltier sweaters than others. Some people can salt out up to 5 grams or sweat out up to 5 grams of salt per hour. So you definitely need to replace that. And if you're drinking coffee, you need to compensate for the sodium depletion that occurs as a result. So the general rule is salt your food to taste.
Yeah.
Every meal.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a huge benefit that anybody can implement to whatever their diet is. Just add a little sodium. I think most athletes just are
It's
deficient.
awesome. When people get on the program and they change about 4 or 5 with seemingly little things, and they come back in 3 days and tell me their life's changed and their performance has improved and their health and their energy and their sleep and everything from 3 or 4 little things. And one of them's sodium. One of them's iodine. One of them's switching to steak. One of them's sleeping better. And one of them is what you eliminate. All of those foods we talked about with anti-nutrients that were causing all of the gastric distress to begin with. And the fruit. Throwing in a few oranges a day or a little bit of orange juice. And there's almost no limit the amount of fruit you can eat and it being healthy. NutritionFacts.org, which is a vegan site that would hate me, they have some great research on there about how healthy fruit can be in any level. The Pure study, Dr. Yusuf, cardiologist and president of the World Health Federation, his study, he talked about the fact that the more fruit they ate, the better their cardiovascular disease and all health outcome improved. So fruit.
And I think that even showed more benefits with fruit than vegetables, didn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It was protective of cardiovascular disease. And I don't shit on people eating fruit or vegetables. I eat vegetables too. I'm just cautious about how much and what kind and how they're prepared, because I don't want them to wreak havoc on the body and cause all that methane production and gas and bloating. So I think there's a good balance in my program. I'm particularly trying to thread the needle between the extremes on either end. The ketos, on one side, the vegans on the other, the carnivores on the other. And even if it fits your macros, it says you can eat anything and everything you want so long as you fit your macros. I think that's short-sighted in terms of your body's performance needs and its micronutrient needs and its anti-nutrient concerns. So
100%.
I think I found a really good balance here that's worked great for me. I've had a difficult stomach all my life. I've been allergic to many things. And so I do avoid a lot of things that I think cause allergy problems with a lot of people. And that's not to say if it doesn't cause an allergy for you, you can't eat it. I just preferentially offer up foods that I think are going to cause the least distress.
Yeah. What are some of the problem foods that you find with most people when they eliminate, they start to feel better?
We kind of went over them. The big ones, I think, are the high gas vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, the wheats, the bread, pasta, spaghetti. Those things can wreak havoc on the body. Even oats. And again, it's dose dependent. You might be able to handle a cup of oats, but it's cumulative. So if you start eating it every single day, it tends to have a cumulative effect. And how you prepare them, you might be able to ferment them overnight in warm water in some sort of yogurt or apple cider vinegar, and that helps ferment them and pre-digest them so you can eat them better. Canola oil, processed vegetable oils, hexane-produced canola, soybean, corn oil. This is in everything that you can imagine. Things like garlic wreak havoc on my body, and onions, xylitol, sorbitol, and mannitol. Sugar alcohols tend to wreak havoc.
Yeah, they've always torn me up.
I can't even eat gum.
Yeah,
and
sometimes
you see this stuff. It's in all these little protein bars.
Yep.
Which I call candy bars.
Yeah.
And all these little breads that people make, these supposedly healthy paleo treats, they sweeten them with sugar alcohols. So I think that's the bulk of the list. There's some other minor things that I probably lost track of.
Yeah, sugar alcohols. They've always torn me up. They've never felt that good for me.
Yeah, what did I do? Go the wrong direction here?
Yeah.
Damn phones! I tell you what.
I was looking at the wall.
See if I can back on here. Is our audience seeing my picture or not?
Not now. Now we're looking at the wall.
I think I flipped it around.
Yeah, we're looking at some a leg press. There we go. So for the iodine, what were you talking about for the iodine? Was it the cranberry juice?
You use an iodine supplement. I prefer a food source because I think there's a whole lot of cofactors and other benefits. And I use cranberry juice, pure cranberry juice that's not from concentrate and no sugars added. And I contacted the folks at Lakewood that make a pure cranberry juice, and they sent me the science to show that it was 600% of your daily RDA of iodine, which might sound like a lot, but for competitive people who sweat out sodium and iodine, it's really quite normal. But there's all the other benefits that come with the cranberry juice that I like. Of course, the tannins, because it's an immune system protector, as I mentioned, with respect to chlorine and fluoride and bromide. Those toxins will lodge into the same receptor sites as iodine in the absence of iodine. And so when you get adequate iodine, it cleans those out. Some people actually have flu-like symptoms for a couple of days when they start taking iodine because you're cleaning out those toxins from those
that's interesting.
receptor sites. Yeah, I've seen it many times. But also, you get the polyphenols and the other things from the cranberry juice. I just think it's everywhere I can, I use a food source. I'm not a supplement guy. I don't take a multivitamin. I don't believe in them. The Harvard research showed us that they didn't improve health outcomes. And so I just don't think that's the source. And plus, they're generally not in the most digestible form. Mm-hmm. And they don't have the proper cofactors in many cases. And they're probably not eaten at the right times or with the right foods. Some things you have to eat with fats.
Yep.
And proteins.
Specifically fat-soluble vitamins.
Fat-soluble vitamins, and you need a good stomach acid to digest calcium and magnesium. If you don't have adequate stomach acid, you're not going to absorb those. So I hope that I'm not trying to make this too complicated. I'm really trying to make it simpler and just make people pay attention to the fact that when they eat a broad variety of very nutrient-dense, micronutrient-dense foods, that they're going to feel better and perform better as a result because they're giving the body what it wants and what it needs.
I always talk about having the balance between the consistency aspect of your diet, because I do think getting into a habit of consistency, consistent meals makes it easy for people to stick to it, but also the variety aspect, because really the only way to get all your micronutrients and hit all these different nutrients we're talking about is to have variety. Like, you're not going to be able to get it with just 3 foods.
No, absolutely not. And that's part of the problem with the over-restriction. It happens in both the bikini preps with the egg whites and whitefish, broccoli, is you're missing an enormous amount of micronutrients, particularly iron and B12 are the main ones. Those are huge. But everything else is important as well. And the lack of fructose, so now your metabolism slows. And so, hell, I'll fix that with some thyroid, as we discussed.
Yeah.
That's huge. Another place that happens is in these diets that try and focus on IBS and Crohn's disease and leaky gut, such as the GAPS diet or
Yep.
even the FODMAP diet. And I put in a link to FODMAP in my program suggesting substitutions for foods that people don't like. But I'm cautious that I don't over-restrict. That's the big knock on those programs, is that you end up over-restricting. Same thing happens with vegan diets. That oftentimes people end up being nutrient deficient over time if they're not very good at utilizing the foods that qualify. So I'm really careful about not doing too much, like I said about in the if it fits your macros, not doing too little in terms of micronutrient restriction, and not putting myself into a camp that doesn't allow me a good broad range, like I mentioned with the carnivore diet or what have you. And it's not to shit on any of those. I think that you need more of the right foods to give your body what it needs. We've been focusing on macros for far too long, and these micros are essential.
Yeah, I mean, you really want to focus on, you want to have you want to do both, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? You can't really have one without the other. Do you, how's it change, or how do you change the diet based off from people wanting to gain size versus a cutting phase?
I put all three in there. The cutting phase, it's calories first and foremost.
Yep.
And when somebody's trying to lose weight, I just make sure they don't exclude the iodine and the fructose and the red meat. And they got to keep that in there. There's a variety of other things I do for gut health, such as the chicken stock, the daily carrot, which we discussed, a daily, sweet potato or potato, just because it's so nutrient dense. Spinach, cooked spinach in particular, is easy to digest and loaded with magnesium and K1. There's lots of great things I put in there that could satisfy almost your entire diet if you're trying to lose weight. And then at the point you want to gain mass or build on calories to fuel workouts, then you just increase the steak and white rice. It's really that simple. Everybody from Hafthor to the 120-pound bikini girl I put on stage last weekend eats the same micronutrient profile. If it satisfies their calorie demands, that's where they stop. Mm-hmm. And if they have more calorie demands, then they're going to need to fill that in with the steak and white rice. It's that simple.
Do you do anything specific, like around training, pre or post workout, or just pretty much just normal meal?
Sodium, because you've improved your sodium intake, and if you get a carb input maybe 2 hours before training, I usually like the Monster Mash. Again, you get your bison and your white rice and your chicken stock. Sits really easy on the stomach. Adequate sodium. You get to the workouts, you don't need stimulants, you don't need pre-workouts. Now, as far as post-workout or even intra-workout, depending on how many calories you're consuming, what you're burning is three things: water, sodium, and glycogen. And so I like to replace that. Now, I think we've dispelled the myth of the post-workout anabolic window for protein. Mm-hmm. It's the adequate protein intake throughout the day, and the daily total seems to be a priority over time-specific. But immediately post-workout, if you've depleted a significant amount of water, sodium, and glycogen, that's the ideal time to replace it, because that's when your body will absorb more of it faster. And a particular type of carb blend, which a great study I post in my vertical diet, shows that when you blend fructose and dextrose, then it absorbs faster through the cells, and more of it is able to be absorbed. And so if you burn, say, 400 calories in a workout, I want you to take in 100 grams of carbohydrates in the form of dextrose and fructose, a 2-to-1 ratio. Dextrose 2, fructose 1 was what the study suggested was optimal. I want you to take in as much sodium as you think you burn, depending on how salty of a sweater you are. Typically, it's 1,000 milligrams. That's a half of a teaspoon. That's not very much.
No.
You could just pour, some pink salt into a little teaspoon, put it on your tongue, and wash it down with your post-workout carb drink. And you've satisfied, I think, the requirements such that this is especially important when I was doing daily doubles, or when I have athletes such as CrossFitters or pro fighters doing daily doubles. Their second workout of the day becomes almost euphoric. They don't hit the wall. They have more energy, more stamina, more endurance. They recover faster. That little drink can be pretty potent for the people who use those calories. Now, if you're just taking it after your typical quote-unquote bodybuilding workout, one-arm tricep extensions and selfies, probably not going to be a huge benefit for you. So,
yeah, there has to be a caveat to that. You got to use it. You got to need it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And most people probably don't. That sounds pretty similar to one what people would consume after weigh-ins.
Yes, exactly. And that's partly where I got this from, or mostly where I got this from, is George Lockhart.
Yeah.
The king of weigh-ins, the trainer of John Jones, Conor McGregor, Cyborg, just one of the premier nutrition guys in the industry, particularly watercut guys. And 2 years ago, I had a pro MMA fighter that was getting ready for a competition, and I actually hired George. I flew him out to my house. He spent 2 days out here working with me and the fighter, and I learned a ton from him. And that's kind of the way I've been throughout my career. I'm not a guru. I didn't invent any of this stuff. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is all stuff that's been done. I just found the greatest people: Flex Wheeler, Mark Bell, Eddie Cohn, Charles Glass, George Lockhart. I've worked with Dave Palumbo. The list goes on and on of the people that I've worked with over the years. The stuff that I read from Greg Nuckols at Mass Review. Obviously, I follow a lot of other, really smart people in the industry. The list could go on and on.
Yeah.
And I've just tried to harvest that information, apply it to myself with a very diligent effort to look at what kind of results I get out of it, hence the blood tests and that. It obviously did very well for me, becoming a pro bodybuilder, starting at a 135-pound college kid, and then a world record powerlifter. And I'm really not, genetically predisposed to that kind of thing. My dad and mom are both small people. And I think with the playing field being even in terms of performance-enhancing drugs, everybody's using them in that area.
Yeah.
The advantage that I had, and the one that I focused on more than anything, was just an attention to detail with diet and sleep, the two hugest things. I was in bed by 10 o'clock every night, and I never missed a meal, and I constantly was focusing on trying to adjust my nutrition to optimize performance. So I don't know if I got distracted from the original question, but I think that's where I'm ending up.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that, that's a part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast so much. When I first started, is just because I've always just been so fascinated to try to learn as much as I possibly can about training, nutrition, supplementation.
Exactly.
I always call it's like an aggressive pursuit of knowledge. Like I'm always reading something, always watching something, and having this podcast presents me the opportunity to have guys like you on. And I just sit back and learn. Like it's funny because when I do these solo ones, I'm just like constantly spitting out information and stuff. But then when I do the interview side, I pretty much just like to sit back and just kind of just feed the guests the questions, and I'm learning too. That's what I like to kind of do it.
Well, and I put all of this information into that vertical diet program. I've been using that with great athletes for years. Hofthor got the same program 2 years ago that I now put on the internet for people to purchase.
Yep.
And again, it also is absolutely relevant for anybody of any size.
Yeah.
And it's 51 pages of information that covers everything from nutrition to hydration to sleep to training to gut health to immune system support. And 100 references. Like I mentioned, I didn't invent this stuff. I've got references to over 100 articles and video links of professionals in the industry who I regard very highly, and whose information I've used over the years to be very successful. I put that on my internet, and it exploded and has gone viral. You've seen it tagged all over the place just in the last 2 weeks. And I'm grateful, I'm shocked, I'm humbled by it, but I'm also so confident in the results. The testimonials I'm getting are similar to what my clients and myself have experienced over the years, and that's very, very reassuring that people's lives are being changed for the better as a result.
Yeah, it's awesome. Just whenever you can put out information, like when you hear, whether it's working with people one-on-one or putting out products, ebooks, programs, and you get that, you get that feedback of, hey, you changed my life, this process, I feel better, look better, perform better. Shit, That's what it's all about.
Shit, I forgot I've got a conference call coming up soon. We better take this thing to a wrap.
We got to wrap this shit up. All right.
Questions.
Cool. All right. Well, last thing. This is going to be something I wanted to ask you. All right. This is last thing here. Taking a little turn. All right. Okay. I want to ask you, do you think, all right, so I'm talking about me here, 165-pound guy.
Yep.
My bench right now is around 425, 430. Do you think it's possible for me to bench 500 pounds in my life?
Yeah, but I don't know if you can do it at that weight. One of the things about the bench press is it seems to go up and down with body weight.
Yep.
Eddie Cohn started at 156 pounds and ended up competing at 242 eventually. So, and I trained with Eric Spoto, one of the greatest benchers of all time.
Yep.
So, and we both say the same thing. if you want to increase your bench, increase your body weight. Now, I'm just saying that doesn't have to be a dirty bulk. I've done that before. I've been 310 pounds with a bloated purple head and horrible health. But I've also been very, very healthy, just as strong in the low 280s. So my idea with my program is if you utilize the kind of nutrients that I'm talking about and build it with the steak and rice necessary to grow, you have good growth. If you can gain weight, muscle in particular, you'll increase your bench. The idea that you can design some particular sort of set and rep scheme and percentage of max and frequency and split and all of that to drastically improve your bench at this point, because you're already well along your way. That's an advanced lift for your size for sure. That's a great lift. The next evolution of that is not going to be had with somebody's special training program. It's happen. I don't care how many jumping jacks you do or push-ups to a slap or board presses or bands or chains. It's not the bread and butter. The bread and butter is going to be, can you sleep more? When I was sleeping 9+ hours, that's when I got the leanest and the strongest. Can you eat more good food? When I was eating steak 8 times a day, that's when I got the strongest. Can you build muscle? And so that's going to be my suggestion, is to focus on outside the gym, not inside.
Cool. Yeah, well, that's like my 7-8 year plan. I don't know if it's possible or not, but we'll see.
Absolutely possible. Yeah. How much can you eat? How hard can you? How well can you sleep? And then just the training is just the stimulus. You only break down muscle in the gym. How well can you recover? Awesome,
Stan. This has been great. How can people get more information about you?
StanEfferding.com, theverticaldiet.com I also have. And my Instagram is Stan Efferding as well. So check it out. I'd love for people to log in and take a look at the Vertical Diet. I explain everything that it does. It's downloadable, available now. I've just had an unbelievably positive feedback. I've posted a few of those things on my site. But I've got hundreds and hundreds. I wake up every morning with 100 DMs and emails from people all over the world.
That's wild.
UK, Canada, Australia, China. I get people that are buying this program from all over the world and loving it, and I'm proud of it. And it's not just a matter of selling it. I've worked hard for people all my career to give out lots of great information. I think this is the culmination of that. This is the best thing I have to offer.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Absolute Strength Podcast. I know I had a ton of fun producing it for you. And before you go, if you could just drop me some feedback, I'd love it. I love reading your feedback. So you can go over to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating, write a little review, what you think of the podcast. I absolutely love it. I read every single one. But it's cool if you don't want to do that. I get it. No one wants to really go out of their way to do anything, let alone write a review. But I want to get your feedback. So drop me a line on Instagram at Hunt Fitness, or on Facebook, Kyle Hunt, or on Twitter, or send a pigeon or something. I don't know. I just want to hear your feedback. So if you want to give me some feedback, let me know what you think. Hit me up on Instagram at Hunt Fitness. And before you go, I have one last thing I want to say. I have a program I want you to check out. It's actually called the Absolute Strength Program, and the link is in the show notes. It's a program I designed to help increase my own squat, bench, and deadlift. And I got pretty strong off of it, and I think you're going to like it. It's a great book. Thousands of people have got amazing results from it. It's in the show notes. All right, guys. Until next time, until next episode, peace.